The first lie arrived 3 months before my wedding. I didn't know it existed yet. I was sitting in my office overlooking downtown Seattle, reviewing vendor contracts between meetings, completely unaware that my parents were quietly dismantling my life behind my back. At the time, everything seemed perfect. My fiancé, Daniel, and I had been together for 4 years. We had survived long distance, career changes, and enough family drama to fill a reality show, or so I thought. Our wedding was 6 weeks away. The venue was booked. The invitations were sent. The rehearsal dinner guest list was finalized. For the first time in my life, I felt stable, safe, happy. Then Daniel started acting strange. Not dramatically, just enough for me to notice. He became distracted during conversations. He checked his phone more often. Sometimes I'd catch him looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite understand. Concern, confusion, almost suspicion. Whenever I asked what was wrong, he'd smile and say he was stressed about work. I wanted to believe him. I almost did. Then one Saturday afternoon, I walked into our kitchen and found him staring at a photograph. The second he saw me, he flipped it face down. Too late. I had already seen it. A little girl, maybe 8 years old. Dark hair, blue dress. Standing beside a playground. "Who's that?" I asked. Daniel hesitated. A little too long. No one. My stomach tightened immediately, because healthy relationships don't require hesitation for simple questions. Daniel. He rubbed the back of his neck. Then finally sighed. "Have you ever lived in Phoenix?" The question hit me like cold water. "What?" "Phoenix," he repeated. "Arizona." "No." Silence. Then he slowly turned the photo back over. "Do you know her?" I stared at the image. The girl was completely unfamiliar. "No." Another pause. Then he asked the question that changed everything. "Are you sure?" For a moment, I genuinely thought he was joking. Then I saw his face. He wasn't joking. Not even close. "What exactly are you asking me?" I said quietly. Daniel looked miserable. Like he didn't want to be having this conversation. "I received a phone call last week." The room suddenly felt smaller. "From who?" He hesitated. "Then, your mother." Every muscle in my body tightened. My mother and I had never been close. Polite, civil, but never close. She had spent most of my life treating me like a permanent disappointment. Too ambitious, too independent, too unwilling to obey. Still, I couldn't imagine what she could possibly say that would lead to this conversation. "What did she tell you?" Daniel looked away. That was my first warning. Then he answered. "She said there was something about your past I deserved to know before the wedding." My heartbeat started climbing. Okay. Another silence. "Then, she said you abandoned a child." For a second, I honestly thought I misheard him. The sentence didn't even make sense. "What?" His expression remained painfully serious. "She said you got pregnant at 17. I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was insane. "What?" "She said your parents raised the child after you left for college." The kitchen disappeared around me. All I could hear was my own pulse, because this wasn't gossip. This wasn't misunderstanding. This was something else, something deliberate. "Daniel," I said slowly, "I've never been pregnant." "I know." "Do you?" The question came out sharper than I intended. He flinched slightly, and that hurt, because if he truly knew, we wouldn't be standing here. My voice dropped. "You believed her." His silence answered before he did. The realization hit harder than the accusation, not because he doubted me, because he considered it possible. Possible enough to investigate. Possible enough to keep secrets. Possible enough to question the woman he planned to marry. I didn't know what to think, he admitted quietly. My chest tightened, and instead of asking me, I wanted proof first. There it was, the damage. Trust isn't destroyed by lies. It's destroyed when someone decides the lie deserves equal consideration. I looked at the photograph again, The little girl smiling beside a swing set. Who is she? Daniel swallowed hard. Your mother said she was your daughter. The absurdity was almost overwhelming. I was 32 years old. I had never even lived in Arizona. Yet somehow my parents had constructed an entire alternate history and delivered it directly to my fiancé. Did she have evidence? I asked. Daniel nodded slowly. My stomach dropped. What evidence? He opened his phone, then handed it to me. The image on the screen made my blood run cold. A birth certificate, mother's name, Rachel Morgan. My name, my exact birthday, my exact hometown. Everything accurate except one thing. It was completely fake. I stared at the document, then back at Daniel, then back at the document, because this wasn't casual manipulation anymore. This was fraud. Detailed, intentional, carefully prepared fraud. Where did she get this? I don't know. I felt suddenly dizzy, not from fear, from betrayal. The amount of effort required to create something like this was staggering. My own parents hadn't simply lied. They had built evidence, created records, manufactured a child, manufactured a history, manufactured a crime, and for the first time, a terrifying question entered my mind. Why? Why now? Why 6 weeks before my wedding? What exactly were they trying to accomplish? Daniel sat down heavily at the kitchen table. I didn't want to believe it. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw something unexpected. Fear, not of me, of being manipulated, of making the wrong decision, of marrying someone while carrying unanswered questions. That softened my anger slightly. Not much, but enough. Then my phone buzzed, a text message from my mother. The timing was so perfect it almost felt planned. Can't wait for the rehearsal dinner. We have a surprise guest coming. I stared at the message. A strange feeling settled in my stomach. Cold, heavy, wrong. Because suddenly I wasn't worried about the lie anymore. I was worried about the surprise, and something told me that 6 weeks from now at our rehearsal dinner, my parents intended to finish whatever they had started. The text from my mother sat in my mind for days. A surprise guest. Most people would read that and think of a distant relative, an old family friend, someone harmless. But my mother had never been harmless. Not when she wanted something, and definitely not when she felt she was losing control. Bye. Monday morning, I had already requested a copy of the birth certificate Daniel showed me. Not because I needed proof it was fake. I knew it was fake. I needed proof of how fake. The document arrived by email just before lunch. I printed it immediately and spread it across my desk. The details were impressive, terrifyingly impressive. Correct social security number. Correct hometown, correct parents' names. Even my high school information was accurate. Whoever created it had access to personal records. Or someone who knew my life extremely well. Someone like my parents. The deeper I looked, the worse it became. The hospital listed on the certificate didn't even exist during the year the child was supposedly born. The physician's signature belonged to a doctor who had retired 5 years earlier, and the registration code was linked to another county entirely. It was a forgery, a good one, but still a forgery. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt sick. Because normal parents don't forge documents to destroy their daughter's wedding. Normal parents don't invent children. Normal parents don't call future spouses and plant doubt. That evening, Daniel came home carrying takeout. Neither of us pretended things were normal anymore. He sat across from me at the dining table while I slid the documents toward him. Look. He studied them carefully. The longer he read, the paler he became. My God. Yeah. He rubbed his forehead. Rachel. The guilt in his voice was obvious and deserved, but right now I had bigger concerns. Forget the document. He looked up. What? The document isn't the real problem. His brow furrowed. Then what is? I thought about the text message. The heart emoji, the confidence behind it, the certainty. They're planning something bigger. A silence followed. Then Daniel nodded slowly, because deep down he knew it too. The next few weeks passed under a cloud of tension. Every wedding event felt contaminated. Every phone call from my parents felt calculated. My mother suddenly became unusually cheerful. My father unusually quiet, both of which terrified me. People become polite when they're hiding something. 3 days before the rehearsal dinner, my cousin Emma called. She sounded nervous. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." A pause. Then, "Do you have a daughter?" I nearly dropped my phone. The room seemed to tilt slightly. "What?" Emma immediately started apologizing. "No, wait, I know how that sounds. Who told you that?" Another pause. Then she sighed. "Your mother." "Of course." My eyes closed slowly. "How many people has she told?" Silence. Too much silence. When Emma finally answered, her voice was tiny. "A lot." My stomach dropped. A lot meant dozens, maybe more, which explained something that had been bothering me for weeks. The strange looks, the awkward conversations, the subtle shifts in people's behavior. They weren't imagining things. They had been fed a story, and most of them believed it. Because why wouldn't they? Who expects parents to fabricate something that... extreme? By the time I ended the call, anger had finally replaced confusion. Not explosive anger, focused anger, the dangerous kind. I spent the next 2 days quietly gathering evidence, copies of records, proof of my whereabouts, official documentation, anything I might need, because a realization had settled into my mind. My parents weren't going to stop. They were escalating, and if they were willing to forge documents, there was no telling what came next. Friday evening arrived. Rehearsal dinner night. The restaurant overlooked Elliott Bay. Private room. 40 guests. Warm lighting. Expensive wine. The kind of place people choose when they want a perfect evening. By 6:30, everyone had arrived. Friends, family, co-workers, future in-laws. People laughed. Waiters moved between tables. Champagne glasses clinked softly. Outwardly, everything looked normal. Yet I couldn't shake the feeling that I was sitting inside a trap. My mother seemed especially pleased. That alone was alarming. She floated from table to table greeting people, smiling constantly, watching me, waiting. My father barely spoke all evening, which was somehow worse. At 7:15, Daniel squeezed my hand beneath the table. "You okay?" "No." His expression tightened. "I know." Then my mother stood and tapped her glass. The room slowly quieted. Conversation stopped. Everyone turned toward her. The moment I saw her smile, I knew. This was it. "My goodness," she said warmly. "Before tomorrow's wedding, I wanted to celebrate family." My pulse started rising. Daniel's hand tightened around mine. Guests smiled politely, unaware. Especially family that has been separated for too long. The room felt colder suddenly. A few people exchanged confused looks. I saw Emma freeze across the room. She knew. My mother continued. Sometimes mistakes happen. The smile never left her face. Sometimes young people make choices they regret. My heart hammered against my ribs. Not from fear anymore, from certainty, because she was really doing it, actually doing it, in public, at my rehearsal dinner. Then she turned toward the doorway and said the words that made every conversation stop completely. "Sweetheart, why don't you come in?" The room fell silent. Every head turned, every eye focused on the entrance. And then, a little girl walked inside, maybe 9 years old. Dark hair, blue dress, exactly like the photograph. Gasps rippled across the room. I heard someone whisper, "Oh my God." My mother looked triumphant. Victorious, like she had just revealed the final piece of a master plan. The child looked nervous, confused, completely unaware she had been turned into a weapon. Then my mother smiled broadly and announced, "Rachel, don't you think it's time you finally met your daughter?" The room exploded into shocked silence. And for one terrifying second, everyone believed her. For 1 second, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The entire room seemed suspended between reality and disbelief. I could feel dozens of eyes on me. Friends, relatives, co-workers, Daniel S. family, all staring. All waiting, because from their perspective, There was a little girl standing in the doorway, and a grandmother introducing her to a mother. A story, a scandal, a secret finally exposed. My mother stood at the center of it all smiling, like she had just won something. The child looked terrified, and that was the first thing that broke through my shock. Not my mother, not the accusation, the girl. Because whatever was happening, she had been dragged into it, used, manipulated, turned into a prop, and she clearly didn't understand why. My mother opened her arms dramatically. "Come here, sweetheart." The little girl hesitated, then slowly walked forward. The room remained silent, waiting, watching, judging. I stood up carefully. My chair scraped softly against the floor. My mother's smile widened. She thought she had me, thought I would panic, deny, cry, beg. Instead, I walked directly toward the child. When I reached her, I crouched slightly so we were eye level. "Hi," I said gently. She looked nervous. "Hi. What's your name?" She glanced toward my mother before answering. "Lily." "Nice to meet you, Lily." The poor kid looked confused, like she had expected something entirely different. Maybe she had been told I was cruel, or ashamed, or dangerous. Children don't arrive at situations like this without being coached first. I smiled softly. "How old are you?" 9. 9. Exactly the age my fictional daughter was supposed to be. Of course. Everything had been scripted, carefully, deliberately. I stood up slowly, then turned toward the room. My mother was still smiling. But I noticed something new. Expectation. She was waiting for me to collapse. Instead, I reached into my purse and pulled out a folder. The same folder I had spent weeks preparing. The same folder she never imagined I'd need. My mother's smile flickered slightly. "Rachel," she said, "you don't need to be embarrassed." The audacity of that sentence almost made me laugh. Instead, I looked at her calmly. "No," I said. "You should be." The room shifted instantly. A murmur moved through the guests. My mother's face tightened. "What are you talking about?" I opened the folder, then handed several copies to nearby tables. "Since we're sharing family stories tonight," I said, "let's share all of them." The room grew quiet again. People started reading. My cousin Emma got the first copy, then Daniel's mother, then several others. Confusion appeared almost immediately. My mother's confidence began slipping. "What is this?" she demanded. I looked directly at her. "Evidence." A pause. Then I continued. "Official state records showing that the birth certificate you distributed is fraudulent." The room froze. My mother's face drained slightly. Just slightly. "Enough. That's ridiculous," she snapped. "Is it?" I pulled out another document. "This is confirmation from the Arizona Department of Health." Then another. "This is verification that the hospital listed on the certificate didn't exist during the year the child was supposedly born." Another. "This is confirmation that the physician's signature belongs to a retired doctor who never treated me." Silence. Absolute silence. Because facts have a way of ruining performances. My father shifted uncomfortably for the first time all evening. I noticed. Everyone noticed. My mother laughed nervously, a terrible sound. Forced, thin. "You're overreacting." The old phrase, the familiar phrase, the phrase she used every time she got caught. But this time, nobody was listening to her. They were reading. The evidence moved from table to table, and with every page turned, her story collapsed further. Then Daniel stood. The room immediately paid attention, because until now he had remained silent. He looked at my mother. Not angry? Disappointed? "Did you really forge those documents?" The question landed heavily, because it came from the person she most wanted to manipulate. For the first time that night, she looked uncertain. "Daniel, sweetheart, did you?" Silence. A long one. Then my father sighed. The sound echoed louder than it should have, because everyone knew what it meant. His shoulders slumped slightly, and suddenly he looked 10 years older. "We thought it would stop the wedding." The room erupted. Gasps, whispers, shock. My mother whipped toward him. "What are you doing?" But it was too late. The truth was out. He rubbed his forehead. We thought she was making a mistake. I stared at him. Years of disappointment settling into one moment. "You tried to destroy my life." His eyes lowered. "We were trying to protect you." That sentence almost broke something inside me. Not because it hurt, because it was pathetic. People always call control protection when they run out of excuses. The room had turned against them completely now. Daniel's father looked furious. My cousins looked horrified. Friends who had known me for years looked sick, because suddenly everyone understood. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't concern. This was sabotage. Then something unexpected happened. A small voice spoke up. "Grandma?" Everyone turned. Lily. The little girl stood in the center of the room, clutching her dress nervously. My mother forced a smile. "Yes, sweetheart?" Lily frowned. "You said she was my mommy." The room somehow became even quieter. My mother froze. The child looked confused, hurt. "Why did you tell me that?" And there it was, the final collapse. Not evidence, not records, not witnesses. A child asking an honest question. Because lies often survive arguments, but they rarely survive innocence. My mother's face crumpled, not from guilt, from exposure. She had used a child, manipulated a child, lied to a child, and now everyone knew it. I walked toward Lily slowly, then knelt beside her. "You didn't do anything wrong." Her eyes filled slightly. "Really? Really?" I glanced toward the adults responsible for this disaster, then back at her. "Sometimes grown-ups make very bad decisions." She nodded slowly, as if that explanation made more sense than anything else she had heard all night. Maybe it did. An hour later, the rehearsal dinner was over. Not because people wanted to leave, because there was nothing left to say. My parents left first, alone. Quiet. For the first time in my life, nobody followed them. Nobody defended them. Nobody blamed me. The truth had finally become too obvious. Outside the restaurant, Daniel wrapped his arms around me. The bay lights reflected across the water behind us. "You okay?" I thought about everything that had happened. The lies, the forged documents, the humiliation they planned, the years of manipulation leading to this moment. Then I looked at him, really looked at him, and smiled. Yeah. For the first time in a long time, I actually was. The next morning, we got married. My parents weren't invited. And somehow that made it the happiest day of my life.